vegetables that you can pull out of the ground, like corn, you know, and gosh, what was the other thing that I told you that people...
You mentioned carrots.
Yes, carrots, and people always say, but they say carrots are good for you. What's kind of the feeling about that? And then I heard somebody say, well, it's because, you know, years ago we would eat that stuff, but the soil was a lot better then. It had more nutrients and the like in it.
Well, I don't know the specifics of, you know, his take on it, or the diet's take on it, but basically it's kind of like this. I'm assuming what they mean is the stuff that's actually underneath of the ground, for the most part.
Right.
Typically with those types of things, you're dealing with the roots. And you think of something like yucca or a potato or a carrot, and those roots are starches which get digested as sugars.
Ah.
And so they're processed as sugars. Now corn is a little confusing to me because, like, you can eat broccoli and stuff, right?
Yes.
Because broccoli has roots, but you're not eating the corn is on the stalk. But corn is one of those unique vegetables that our body really doesn't treat as a vegetable. In fact, our body becomes acidic in order to digest it. The body has to turn itself, or at least the environment in the stomach and the intestines, in order for digestion of any food, to a certain pH. And our body has a resting pH. And when we go alkaline or below that pH, it's a really nice thing for our body. And when we go acidic, it's a tough thing for our body. It causes inflammation, it causes pain, it causes disease process. And it allows a lot of the bad bugs that are always trying to infiltrate our guts and subsequently the rest of our body to get in. And typically with a vegetable that is not a root or a starch, but you know, your green vegetables and your leafy vegetables and those types of things, you're creating an alkaline environment, which is just fabulous, especially when you're eating a high protein type of situation, because the protein breaks down into amino acids, and guess what? You got to be acidic to eat protein. So if all you do is eat protein and no vegetables, you're killing yourself. So the vegetables and the effect that they have on your body, not only the fiber and the nutrients, but the actual pH environment that it creates within your body and subsequently your blood, is fabulous. Corn makes us acidic. So corn, we don't get the benefits that we would get with vegetables, and if you eat the corn with some protein, you're just increasing your acidity.
And the other thing I was saying is that, the way it's explained to me, is that initially you start out not eating and doing a lot of these things like sweets and the like because you're trying to cleanse out and retrain your pancreas to do its job. What does the pancreas do then?
Well, the pancreas, there's this stuff called insulin. Basically, insulin gets released due to most nutrient digestion, but big time with carbohydrates. And what insulin does is it takes nutrients, we can say glucose as far as carbohydrates, that's what carbohydrates get turned into, and it takes it to target tissues, whether that's into muscles or joints or the brain for that matter. And the consequence of insulin release is that if we have spikes in it and we have falls, we have something called cortisol release, and that is where we start to see all the body fat. And that's what goes ahead and by default, if you're having a cortisol release and these high insulin spikes, you're going to be storing your nutrients as body fat rather than doing something good with them. So when we have high concentrated sugar intake, and certainly you could do this eating fruit, but there's a difference between eating a cup of blueberries. Just a cup of blueberries might have 24 to 37 grams of sugar or carbohydrate, but it's also got fiber that slows down the insulin release, et cetera, et cetera. When you drink a soda, you are at anywhere between 32 and 60 grams of sugar, and that's all high fructose corn syrup, which is basically concentrated carbohydrate and nothing else. So when you do that, what you do is you cause your pancreas to work over, you know, it goes into overload. There's these things in there called goblet cells, and the other things releasing the insulin, and they just start dumping that into your system, and it wears out the pancreas. That's why we have diabetes, diet-induced or type 2. Quite often, it's because of the failure of the pancreas. It just stops being able to produce insulin.
So this would be good.
You wear it out. It's
people.
like running your engine without ever changing your oil, and you just start burning oil, you know. And that's when you start ending up with the diabetes. But before that, you're overweight, you know, and unless you've got thyroid problems, and then you're losing weight and you're sweating all the time and all that type of stuff. So yeah, the pancreas is the guy that helps us do stuff with our carbohydrates. And if you remove the sugar, then the pancreas can actually heal itself. The brain controls those processes. It gets in there and it improves the integrity of the pancreas. It makes it more efficient. And then if you go in and you add carbohydrate and you add things that cause insulin response in a more appropriate fashion, or a more, you know, you mentioned the soil that we can get back to, but the way things used to be when we used to eat them, then the pancreas can go on and not wear itself out so much. Just like an engine, you know, especially if you got like a Honda or a BMW, you can put 300,000 miles on that thing as long as you take care of it.
Wow.
It'll outlast you, you know.
Oh gosh, I'm really going to stick with this diet because the other thing is that you can't eat fruit.
Sugar.
That's the sugar.
You gotta give it a break.
You're really giving it a break, and you just can't. And I heard people say, "Oh, but fruit's supposed to be so good for you." And I thought it was because, but it's got this natural sugar, a sweetness in there. So, and we're trying to just do away with that. You know, something else I've noticed too. I've noticed that my brain is defogging.
Beautiful.
And I was starting to have problems remembering names of people and stuff, and it comes back to me quicker.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much part of the, just...
Well, short answer is yes. The medium answer, is that your brain is dependent on glucose. Thinking burns calories. That's why you get so hungry when you're studying and all that stuff.
Okay.
And you always see people reaching for the Snickers, you know. But it needs glucose. That's the fuel it gets. And when you're spiking constantly, you're just dumping it in, and when you're spiking it constantly, what begins to happen is your brain gets a lot. It's like a camel. It gets a lot, and then it gets none, and it doesn't know what to do when it's not getting it. Now, the interesting thing is that the body can get glucose or glycogen from different sources. In fact, if you remove all sugars, which at some point in this diet it sounds like you're doing, your body actually goes into a state of what's called ketosis, where it starts mobilizing fatty acid chains or your obesity and burning it up for energy to make glucose. Yes. And it's a longer process that actually increases your metabolism because it takes more ATP or energy to do it. But then your brain just starts feeding off of fat. So when you find that happy medium and you don't have the big insulin response, then the body can just go back and forth between fat and sugar and fat and sugar, and you can have a reasonable amount of fruit, et cetera, with no problems, and you literally will get smarter.
That's what they do. There's a certain number of weeks that you're without the sugar and all of that, and then they start to gradually build it back into your system. Now your pancreas is really able to deal with it, but you don't overdo. You do it in adequate portions such that your body can really deal with it.
You retrain your body and subsequently retrain your brain. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's a concert. It's an orchestra.
Now, when you work with your patients, with the children and adults that you work with, is that kind of in line with what you're doing, that you're really trying to get them to retrain the body and get the body so that they're not solely dependent on stuff that's not good for you?
Absolutely. I see in general, most people are highly dependent on carbohydrates in their diet, and they might not even know it. I get a lot of people coming in saying, we're eating potatoes type people, and they don't realize that the potatoes are the same as white bread or the same as candy bars and so on and so forth. And education is a really huge part of that because they're not thinking clearly. They're addicted to these types of sugars, and when they don't realize it, there are all sorts of consequences in their life that they don't realize could have anything to do with food, whether it be depression or an attention deficit disorder or low back pain or something like that. I typically I can go very in depth, and depending on whether I'm working with a bodybuilder or a PhD, a nerd, or somebody like me, or somebody trying to deal with behavioral issues or attention deficit disorder. We can get very in depth, but typically I like to get a base, and I refer to it as a paleo or an anti-inflammatory type diet, which is very similar. And the idea is that we get back to eating what we were designed to eat.
Mm.
Fact is,